My beautiful bookish babes. And today I just want to jump right in and review the last book I read for the month of February, and that is The Woman in Cabin 10 by Ruth Ware. This is the second book written by this particular author. I did borrow it from my library on their digital catalog. I had previously read her first book, In a Dark, Dark Wood, over, I believe it was the summer, which it was a pretty decent book, but I'm not here to discuss that book. The Woman in Cabin 10 is a kind of a whodunit. It was listed as a book similar to And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie, and so it kind of piqued my interest. In that I kind of like that's one of my favorite stories actually. So I thought I'd give it a go. It does keep your interest. It's a well-written book, much better than her first book, I have to say. I did not enjoy the first book at all. In fact, I ended up giving it away after I read it, just because it was not something that really piqued my interest. This isn't a genre I read very often. It's not something I particularly care for, all this guessing and whodunit and cliffhanger endings and all that kind of stuff. But this particular book was interesting in that it takes place on a cruise ship. So you have a pretty limited cast of characters. Our main character is Lo Blackstock, I believe, and she's a travel writer for a magazine, and she ends up taking a friend's place on this cruise ship. It's a smaller size cruise ship, only holds, it's only got 10 cabins. And so they all convene for this maiden voyage. And the owner of the ship and his wife are on there, as well as a few other motley crew characters, kind of the mover and shakers in travel writing and that kind of stuff. And so she's somewhat familiar with some of the people. One of them is an ex-colleague that she had worked with and previously had dated. On the first night there, she thinks she sees or overhears a murder. And of course the book then goes on to her trying to figure out what had happened. The storyline has that kind of unreliable narrator situation where Lo is a character who had a break-in before she had gone onto this cruise, and it's quite interesting how they had developed it up, because they're trying to do the whole angle of she being someone who's on anxiety medication, and of course then had this break-in, is having a hard time recovering from the break-in, and not sleeping very well. And so on the first night of the main voyage during the party, she drank a lot, and so she becomes the unreliable narrator of this story. Everyone's questioning whether what she's saying is true or not, and that she can't be sure of what she heard because she was drunk and because she's on these medications and the alcohol and meds don't mix and she hadn't been sleeping. So it kind of leads to this whole what actually happened situation. The woman who is missing was not actually a passenger. They can't find her. Nobody ever saw this woman that she thinks she saw. And so it does leave you kind of wanting to know more. Unfortunately for me, the book had some red herrings in it that just were unnecessary. I didn't care for how some of the questions were left unanswered. They seemed to be big deals at the time, and then by the time the end of the book wrapped up, they weren't even ever made into anything more. They were just these random events that were brought up. And I didn't really care for that part. I like my stories, especially the whodunits, to kind of be wrapped up tight. I don't like, well, why didn't you make that a further situation? Why wasn't this a further? Why didn't this play into this? To me, it just leaves everything kind of a little bit of a mess. And so I didn't particularly care for that entire situation. Overall, it is a good read. I read it, I believe, a day and a half it took me to read the story. The characters weren't especially well developed. They were a bunch of crew of cliche characters. Like, everybody was playing the parts that they should have been playing and not really delving into anyone more than the main narrator of the story. It's told from her perspective with brief intermissions in between coming from the perspective of, I believe it's her boyfriend, where she's gone missing and he's looking for help. But it's always the end of each part of the story. There's, I believe, 8 parts to this story, and at the end it shows from his perspective how she hasn't been in contact, and a body has been found during the looking while they're trying to find where she is and all this kind of stuff. I kind of liked how that was added in, to see this perspective and kind of keep you trailing along. Overall, I gave the book a 3.5 out of 5. I would recommend it to people who really enjoy that kind of story and that genre of books. But for me, it just didn't keep my interest beyond the end of the story. It's not something I'm going to think about. It's not something I'm going to go back to. I enjoyed it while I read it, and that's probably going to be the end of where that stands. So if you've read that book, tell me what you think. I'd like to know. I kind of am biased in that I don't care for those stories. So I really, really love And Then There Were None, and this was nothing like that. This did not have the tight plot. It did not have everything that book had. So for me, it was a letdown in that I was expecting something entirely different. This was more of a girl on the train type style. Tell me if you liked it or not. Tell me what you liked about it. Tell me how you thought of the characters, especially Lo. She was a different kind of character. She was actually one I could kind of relate to. So overall, it was a good book, and I should be back in a couple days with another review for you guys.